So the battle over border security just got even more complicated even after the Supreme Court issued an emergency order. The Fifth Circuit has now issued a decision blocking the Biden administration's policies around the border, and now the Eighth Circuit is set to do the same. So let's talk about what is happening. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to ask you guys for a huge favor. Looking at some of my analytics, about 60% of all viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to support the channel for free, maybe give me a free Christmas gift, because it's the holiday season. Merry Christmas to everybody. Please consider subscribing to the channel. That does help the channel to grow and also triggers the algorithm to send this video out to more people. But regardless, thank you guys so much for all of your support. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about multiple decisions which are now impacting the issue over the Texas border and just general border security. Things are now getting even more complicated, not only because the Supreme Court orders, but now the state of Iowa's recent law, which is almost identical to the Texas law, is now set to be ruled on by the Eighth Circuit. But we also just received another decision by the Fiz Circuit Court of Appeals, which blocked a different aspect of the federal government's restrictions on the border, cutting C-wire or concertina wire along the border. Well, we just got a decision out of the Fifth Circuit, which struck down that action. The wins in the Fifth Circuit Texas border cases now sets up another big win in the Iowa border lawsuit, which is pending in front of the Eighth Circuit. So we need to do some background on these cases so you understand what is happening in some of these and how do they interplay. Texas SB4 effectively makes it a crime for an individual to violate federal law by crossing into the state of Texas at any location other than a lawful point of entry. It also makes it a further crime to illegally re-enter once you've been removed from the state of Texas or just removed from the US at large. It also gives a component to some state judges to issue orders requiring those people be returned to the nation where they came. This bill was challenged by the Biden administration in a federal district court in Texas, and on review, that court granted a preliminary injunction which prevented Texas from enforcing all of SB4. The lower court in that case placed a universal preliminary injunction on the SB4 law, and it broadly blocks the enforcement of that statute. The lower court found that SB4 was facially invalid. Texas appealed that injunction up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and in response, the Fifth Circuit issued an administrative stay on that lower court universal order. So it was a temporary stay, essentially a temporary block on what the lower court said. In response to that, various cases were then consolidated, and then those plaintiffs filed for emergency Supreme Court review. They wanted the Supreme Court to intervene on an emergency basis. And on review, the Supreme Court denied that Biden administration request. So they ruled against the Biden administration and essentially said that that administrative stay could remain in place. And the effect of that was that Texas could still enforce the SB4 border law. Now, interestingly, in response to that Supreme Court order, once it went back down to the Fifth Circuit decided to remove their own administrative stay. And in effect, that was kind of an Uno reverse on what the Supreme Court said. And effectively, that allowed the Biden administration to block some of the SB4 law, and the SB4 law was not allowed to be enforced in effect by the state of Texas. The Fifth Circuit quickly then reviewed this case, heard oral arguments on whether they will grant a preliminary injunction in favor of the Biden administration, which would again more permanently close the door on SB4's implementation. There was a lot of dispute during the hearings, especially from dissenting Judge Oldham, who was very concerned about the scope of the relief that was granted by the lower court. There's a lot of question about whether or not a universal and just outright block of all of SB4 under a facial challenge is proper. We are currently still waiting on the Fifth Circuit to rule on that issue, but there is another lawsuit going on in a different state, in a different jurisdiction, the Eighth Circuit, and it deals with an almost identical law to SB4 because Iowa passed a similar law, which is Iowa Senate File 2340, which is essentially a clone of Texas SB4. The Iowa law was challenged by the Biden administration in a case U.S. versus the state of Iowa, and recently the district court reviewing that issue granted the Biden administration's request for a preliminary injunction, so very similar to what happened also in the Texas case. The Iowa immigration measure, according to the judge, is preempted in its entirety by federal law and that it's invalid. He went on to state that in his opinion that as a matter of politics, the new legislation might be defensible, but as a matter of the constitutional law, it is not, and that's why he struck it down. That decision by the lower court was then appealed to the Eighth Circuit. The Eighth Circuit heard oral arguments on this issue, and now you have both the Fifth Circuit and the Eighth Circuit who are set to rule on almost identical laws. Now, while those are pending, there is another decision that just came out of the Fifth Circuit that also deals with border security, and that is the Eagle Pass case, which was just ruled on by the Fifth Circuit. In that case, the state of Texas was seeking to effectively block the federal government, including the Border Patrol agents, from entering into Texas property and then cutting concertina wire, also known as C-wire. The Fifth Circuit ruled in their recent decision that we now rule that Texas is entitled to a preliminary injunction. Specifically, the United States clearly waived sovereign immunity as to Texas state law claims under Section 702 of the Administrative Procedures Act. That conclusion is supported by a flood of uncontradicted circuit precedent to which the United States has no answer. We also reject the United States' alternate arguments. The injunction is not barred by intergovernmental immunity because Texas is seeking not to regulate Border Patrol, but only to safeguard its own property. Nor for similar reasons is the injunction barred by the Immigration and Nationality Act. Finally, Texas has satisfied the injunction factors. Most importantly, the United States does not even contest that Texas has shown it will likely succeed in the state law trespass claims. Accordingly, we reverse the district court's judgment and grant Texas' request for a preliminary injunction. Based on the district court's supplemental fact findings concerning intervening events in Shelby Park, however, we modified the preliminary injunction as follows. Defendants are enjoined from damaging, destroying, or otherwise interfering with Texas' sea-wire fence in the vicinity of Eagle Pass, Texas, as indicated in Texas' complaint in instances where defendants have the necessary access to both sides of the Texas sea-wire for immigration law enforcement and emergency purposes. So in that decision, the Fifth Circuit ruled in favor of the state of Texas and found that the state of Texas is not trying to regulate federal actions or federal Border Patrol actions or what they're doing there, but essentially they're just trying to protect their own property. However, now you also have the Biden administration in that case. They submitted a letter to the Fifth Circuit claiming that the order of the Fifth Circuit is unclear and that the Biden administration still believes that they have the right to cut sea wire at all locations for claimed medical emergencies. And that's regardless of the fact if they have access to both sides. If they don't have access to one side or they have access to both sides, they claim under any circumstance they can cut the wire. So essentially they claim that even if Border Patrol and the federal government has access to both sides of the wire, they still have the complete discretion to cut the wire if there is a claimed medical emergency, and then they have the right to essentially leave it open. So even in the case which they lost in the Fifth Circuit, the Biden administration is still playing games, trying to say that they do not understand what the Fifth Circuit said in their decision. So these are three very important border security lawsuits that are trying to wrap up before the presidential transition in January. They're all interplaying with one another. The Biden administration is arguing that they can still cut border wire despite the loss in the Eagle Pass case. And now you have the pending decisions in the Fifth Circuit and the Eighth Circuit about the SB4 law and then also the Clone, Iowa law. I suspect, however, that since the Fifth Circuit ruled against the Biden administration in the Eagle Pass case, they're likely going to rule against them also in the SB4 lawsuit. And then that would put the Eighth Circuit in a very hard position where they would have to rule on a clone bill that's already been upheld in a different circuit court like the Fifth Circuit. And if they rule against the Iowa bill, well, then that would create a circuit split and clear the path for the states here to go to the Supreme Court. So these are some very interesting developments in these border lawsuits. There will clearly be a lot of changes with the new administration, but the current Biden administration and the attorneys of the Biden administration are working overtime to try to win these cases as soon as possible before the transition. So if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.